The Week with Ben Ellis.
This is Switch.
It's The Week with me, Ben Ellis, here on Switch Radio on this Sunday afternoon. It's time to bring in our co-host for this week. Normally, it's one of the regular Switch Radio presenters, but we're going to do something a little bit different this week. We're going to delve into our past, and our past is something that's quite relevant on Switch Radio, certainly for me anyway, right now. But somebody who you may remember, if you're a big fan of Switch Radio, when we kind of made history and we broadcast for 13 hours in May 2015 the general election results. We were the first station in Birmingham, other than the BBC, to do that, and we've covered every general election since. But it was that night where we pioneered the coverage. And in the studio with me that night and morning, all 13 hours, was Paul Atkins. And Paul joins me on the line right now. Paul, hello.
Hi Ben, how are you doing?
I'm good. So yeah, you're part of Switch Radio's past, and we do like to keep up with our with our old friends and stuff. You moved on from Switch. We'll get on to sort of what you're up to right now, but it is good to hear from you again.
Yeah, absolutely. I still kind of listening to Switch. And I tend to get a lot of my kind of news about what's going on in Birmingham from Switch Radio, actually.
Well, that's what an endorsement that is. That's exactly what we're looking for. And I just mentioned sort of nostalgia, and I'm saying this kind of quietly, but also broadcasting at the same time, which is a bit of an oxymoron. This Friday coming, the 20th of November, will be the 20th anniversary of my very first show on what is now Switch Radio. So, wow. Yeah, take a deep breath. So we did the election 5 years ago, and it's coming up on 20 years. And yeah, it's all sort of a proper midlife crisis time for me, to be honest. Is where we kind of are, and dealing with all of the issues that we do on this show and what have you brings us neatly to the stories of the week. And we are in our second week of lockdown in England for coronavirus. You're in Wales at the moment, Paul?
I'm not actually. No? At the moment, I'm over in Leicestershire.
Okay, so you're part of the lockdown as well. Okay. There are feelings that this lockdown isn't working very well, and that people are kind of flouting the rules. So far as I'm concerned, the only difference I've noticed is literally the pubs are closed. I've sort of been out and about, and you sort of do things right, and you're social distancing, and you're wearing your mask, and you're using your hand sanitizers and what have you. But I've just noticed that or maybe is it just because it feels normal because we've been doing it for so long now?
I think so, but I was in B&M earlier, and it was absolutely packed, and I was kind of thinking, this doesn't feel at all like a lockdown.
Yeah.
Apart from the masks and apart from all the kind of accoutrements of kind of the lockdown that we all got used to, it felt remarkably normal in a way that was quite disconcerting because it shouldn't. It just doesn't seem to feel like. Back in March, it really had kind of like an eerie kind of silence, didn't it? Like,
yes, it did.
Kind of felt a bit kind of abandoned and kind of odd. But it's remarkably back to normal. And I think that's kind of not a good thing.
No, it is the new normal. We were going to have on the show this week. I think we're going to have to hold this over to next week. There's been a study that because of the lockdown now, that people are thinking it's a good idea to actually start the Christmas celebrations in the middle of November just to start feeling positive about things again. Some people, we don't bother until December or what have you. But there's a lot of weight behind public opinion that we should be starting to cheer ourselves up maybe sooner.
Yeah, I think we're kind of going against kind of human nature a little bit here. That's a problem. There's one thing if you've got a lockdown for a couple of weeks, and that's quite tough. But now it seems to just be going on and on and on. And obviously, I think it's kind of improving slightly with the talk of the vaccine. But I think there's a kind of wearing on the part of the public where people are just getting a little bit sick of it, which is a bit worrying because we're going into what could conceivably be the most dangerous time for this virus. So it's a bit worrying, really.
Yeah, it's conflicting stories all the time as well, though, isn't there? You hear a report that the R number's gone down a bit here, but the number of cases has gone up, the number of hospital admissions has gone up, the number of deaths has gone up, but things seem to be plateauing off in other areas. And we've got talk of the vaccine now. I don't know about you. I literally just take it a day at a time. I really do. I don't look
Yeah,
further than one day ahead.
that's an odd thing, isn't it? In the way that kind of time has collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because you just don't think more than kind of a week ahead. I'm used to think, a couple of months ahead, and you'd have things planned, and you'd be looking forward to things. But really, you just kind of go day by day, don't you, and week by week. It's just it's collapsed time.
Yeah, very, very much so. So talk of the vaccine, it's all looking pretty positive, but the caveats have been put there by the government to say, look, just because there is a vaccine and we're hoping to roll it out doesn't mean that that sort of everything's fine now. Would you yourself, Paul, be willing to participate in any trials?
I'd be the first in line.
You would.
Honestly,
Interesting.
with this vaccine. I mean, what worries me about the vaccine is this is a government that can't get testing and tracing right. How on earth are they going to get this kind of, from a logistical point of view, working? Because it's quite a challenge. I think it needs to be kind of sub-zero temperatures that it needs to be stored at. Like, how are we going to get that out to lots of parts of the country if we can't do testing and tracing? I just don't understand it. It seems to be that's going to be the next big kind of scandal, really, is how do we kind of get it out to everyone?
Well, we keep being told by our leader that it's literally the best test and trace system in the world, and it's the envy of the world. But we still can't seem to get it right, and some people who don't realise that spreadsheets aren't sort of infinitive. So 4,000 people were lost, a few weeks ago, and there's still always sort of reports of missing data. I think that's an interesting point that you make, though. That how can you roll out a vaccine effectively if the test and trace is? I never actually thought of that. That's a good point.
I think that's been for me the big kind of failure of this coronavirus strategy. It's the test and trace. I mean, why? I understand that this is a difficult problem, and I understand that there are logistical issues with it, but this should have been at the kind of forefront of our strategy to fight COVID-19. It just doesn't seem to have been. It seems to have always been an afterthought and something that we kind of that we kind of have given to other people to sort out. This just doesn't seem to be kind of top of mind for the government at all.
Yeah, I try not to get too political on this show because it could be problematic for me. The big news about Boris's two main men have left Downing Street. What are your thoughts on that?
Not really many thoughts. Really. Dominic Cummings, obviously the big kind of evil genius of the
Quotation marks on the camera.
Brexit strategy and the Leave strategy. Yeah. So I mean, clearly he was very good at his job in some senses, which was kind of connecting Boris with that particular part of the kind of Brexiteer land. So I think he'll be missed in certainly kind of being the kind of devil on the shoulder of the Prime Minister, always kind of whispering in his ear, which was apparently why he was employed. But I don't think it'll make much of a difference. I think a lot of this kind of stuff is kind of baked into the cake at this stage.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, it's in law that the lockdown is going to lift on December the 2nd, and if they want to continue any such restrictions, I suppose an act of parliament will have to go through in order to get it extended. And then Boris Johnson is dependent on backbench support, which it's interesting because just from the political side, Paul, as I say, I have to be quite careful. We're almost a year on from the Brexit election, which Boris Johnson won. And do you think we could be, and we talked about elections on this station, and we used to analyse it, and you've got a history yourself working with the Green Party in Wales, but just analysing it, do you think we're seeing the potential difficulty that a Prime Minister has who wins a single issue general election, which Brexit was. And that's where they took a lot of the red wall seats from Labour, but on the basis that we're going to get Brexit done. Well, okay, getting Brexit done is one thing, but you kind of haven't bargained for all the other things that Tory MPs could become kind of disgruntled about. And although an 86-seat majority, I think it was for Boris Johnson, when it's on a single issue, that's not a stronger base as it appears in terms of the numbers.
No, and I think this goes back to just a general thing with Boris Johnson. I was reading an article, I think it was in the Times today, and it was talking about how Boris Johnson just isn't very good at leadership and detail. Like, he's very good at the kind of sunny uplands optimism thing, but he's not very good at the kind of the day-to-day minutiae of actually running things. And often he's tended to kind of just surround himself with a coterie of people who are very good at that kind of thing. And he tends to probably more than most recent prime ministers, devolve decision making to other people in his team. And I think actually the team he assembles was very much a team that was about that one issue, like you said, Ben. And of course, this coronavirus issue is something which requires a very different skill set to the kind of Dominic Cummings of the world and those kind of people who were very much assembled to kind of fight on that particular issue. And I think we're seeing the problem of that leadership style kind of play out at the moment.
It is the week with me, Ben Ellis, here on Switch Radio on this Sunday afternoon. Paul Atkins has joined us on the line to talk through some of the stories of the week. We're looking at some of the stories across Birmingham and Solihull right now. We mentioned coronavirus previously, Paul, and we talk about we can't get sort of test and trace right. Solihull's been missed off. The areas involved in the next phase of mass coronavirus testing. I mean, Solihull's not a little village by any means. That's a lot of people.
It is. It's quite worrying, really, isn't it? What do you know anything about what the logic behind that was?
I really don't know. I mean, until about 6 weeks ago, I lived in Solihull, but I've since moved. But the story goes that in contrast to nearby Birmingham, Dudley, and Wolverhampton, the borough was not named among the 67 councils set to be supplied with thousands of testing kits within days. The Department for Health confirmed on Tuesday which local authorities would receive batches of the rapid turnaround test, which can give a result within an hour. The Director of Public Health, Ruth Tennant for Solihull, touched upon the rollout of mass testing this week and said the council will be considering the local options. I don't know what that means, considering the local options, but they've since said, Solihull Council, that there isn't currently a timetable to introduce the scheme locally, but it would work closely with the national team and other pilot areas to prepare for a wider rollout. I think possibly the best thing Solihull can hope for is that they're part of the West Midlands Combined Authority, and there might be some sort of overspill from Birmingham, Sandwell, Dudley, Wolverhampton, that kind of thing. But to miss out Solihull, that is a large chunk.
It is, yeah. I don't quite understand the logic of it. Ben, these are the rapid testing kits, aren't they? Which are,
yeah,
as I understand it, they kind of give you like a test result in about 90 minutes. Is that right?
Apparently so. I mean, I haven't yet had the need for. I've had what you'd call the previous test, where you found out within a couple of days, and touch wood, it came sort of negative. But I was quite happy with the 48-hour turnaround. But again, I need to be kind of careful with that, because I've got it kind of cushy here. I'm working from home every day anyway, so if I was to catch the virus, isolation wouldn't be that big a deal. I could still carry on doing what I'm doing. So to be kind of blasé about that for myself would probably be wrong. So if they can speed it up, so if's a big word, of course, then yeah, 90 minutes, yeah, let's go for it.
Because ideally, you'd want a situation where you could, people could be tested very, very frequently, and then you could make it a condition of going into public areas, couldn't you? Like you'd have to scan a QR code or something like that, and that would be ideal. But it seems to me, and I'm not a doctor or or anyone who kind of knows anything about this kind of stuff, really. But wasn't there a problem with the White House, actually, that they were doing these kind of rapid test, corona test things, but they weren't necessarily reliable? Isn't there some kind of issue around that? I don't know.
I haven't heard that, I must admit. My own result and the sort of family's result was a very firm negative, so we'll kind of take that. Moving on to other stories. This is great. It's great and it's also not great, but there we go. Activities such as drinking alcohol, smoking, vaping, and playing music on buses are set to be banned via bylaws in a devolution deal. Aren't these kind of things banned anyway? Are you not allowed to do these things on buses?
I love this story, Ben, because this is something quite close to my heart. When I worked for Switch Radio, I used to take 2 buses into Castle Vale, including the 67.
The good old
the
67.
67. Yeah. And the things I saw on the bus, you just wouldn't believe. I mean, I can't kind of talk about most of them on the radio, but some of them were absolutely amazing.
Well, these have been approved by the seeking of bylaws, which will ban nuisance activities already in place on rail and tram within the region. So the buses are behind that. I think what they're saying is the difference is National Express West Midlands, who operate the buses, they can put their own rules in place, and they can say don't do this, don't do that, but it's not actually a criminal offence if you break that law. But that's kind of what they're saying. But a report to the board shows new bylaws proposed, which will be submitted to government for approval with the aim of going live in spring 2021. So these include entering a vehicle while unfit as a result of being in a state of intoxication from liquor or illegal drugs, drinking alcohol on a vehicle unless permitted to do so by the operator. Sorry, the driver. What driver would allow you to do that?
Yeah, do you just kind of go on with kind of like the vodka?
Yeah. Can I have a look at what you got? Yeah, that's all right. Yeah. Loitering to the annoyance of others, or if asked not to do so by an authorized person. Other rules are included through the alternative route of combined authority reform option, suggestions for the government's local recovery and English devolution white paper. Those are just sort of long words. It's a true story. You mentioned the 67. This happened to me this week without me even catching the bus. One of our own presenters, Terry Ann here on Switch Radio, put a tweet up about she could quote the tweet herself, but she was saying that it'd be nice if the bus drivers smiled every once in a while. You know, is it too much to ask? Could you not just cheer up a bit, people? I think was what she was trying to say. And I responded to the tweet with a tweet of my own and said, this is absolutely a true story. When I did the breakfast show on Switch Radio many years ago, Paul, you might remember, I had a rocky ride into the studio very early one morning, and I can't even remember what happened, but it did get me in a bit of a state. And they always say never take your problems onto the radio, and I learnt that morning because I came into the studio, opened the microphone, and said to some of the bus drivers of Birmingham and the West Midlands, I said, look, some of you, I'm not talking about all of you, some of you, if I did my job half as bad as some of you do yours, I'd expect to be signing on. And that's what so I had a bit of a rant. And by the time the show had finished, I kind of forgot about it and sort of moved on. Left the studio to go home, waiting for the 67. The bus is coming. The driver just waves at me, smiling, and refuses to stop because he's obviously heard. So I don't think nobody's listening because they'd obviously heard that much. So I told Terry Ann this in this tweet the other day. And I got a response from National Express West Midlands the other day saying, we're sorry to hear about your bad experience, Ben. Could you give us some details and we'll look into it? I was like,
oh, wow.
No, this was like 6 years ago. This was 6 years ago, and I've moved on. I've kind of put it behind me.
Lie, Ben. It's clearly quite raw.
Yeah,
well, I'm Welsh.
Are you?
Yeah, go on. I know I don't sound it. It's somewhat lost the accent, I think. But Cardiff bus drivers are really, really sunny and happy. like the first thing I noticed when I moved to Birmingham was how sad and downtrodden obviously a lot of the bus drivers were, and I just wondered what was going on. But then actually on my travels in to kind of work on the bus, I started to get somewhat of an idea why with all the kind of shenanigans that kind of went on. I remember one person, does this still happen on the bus, because I don't take the bus anymore, but when I was commuting in on the bus, people were always smoking on the top deck.
I'd say I've probably only caught 3 buses since coronavirus turned up. And I can't recall, but I'm sure it's I'm sure it's happened.
Yeah, like every single time on the 67. Like I'd never experienced that when I lived in Cardiff, but every time I was on the 67, people were smoking. You know, I witnessed a fight break out on the bus. I'd never seen that before.
Wow. You're in the big city now. Yeah.
There was one guy that lit up a cigarette and was asked to, stop smoking essentially by one of the other passengers, and he said no, and this guy just decided to just put a bottle of water over him.
Nice, fair enough.
Which was fair enough, I thought, but then the guy who was smoking threatened to kind of call the police.
Right.
And the guy said, "You're smoking on the bus. Like, why would you call the police?" And he said, "It's my right."
But now we know he could have called the police and he technically wouldn't have been arrested, because now we know that is going to be banned where it wasn't before.
That's incredible.
That's fascinating stuff, isn't it? Talking about elections a lot, a voter ID pilot, which would see Birmingham voters required to present photo ID at their polling station, could be rolled out as early as the 2022 local elections, acting on a commitment by government to introduce voter ID by the 2024 general election. The council has put together an information briefing on how the scheme might be implemented. A lot of talk, obviously, in America about alleged voter fraud. We'll get onto that later, don't you worry. Do you think this is a good thing, or is it just the latest step in getting towards the nanny state?
The only nanny state I like is that kind of beer. But apart from that, this is such a solution in search of a problem, isn't it? I mean, vote. It's the big problem that we have in the UK is getting people to vote.
Yeah, true.
Why are we worrying about kind of this problem? There doesn't seem to be any evidence whatsoever that indicates that there is a significant problem with voter fraud, in the UK or in the US, and we'll talk about that later. What is the logic and the justification behind this? I mean, I just don't understand it.
I would possibly think, and I would only be speculating, really, and of course it wouldn't matter so much in local elections. Possibly those who put exit polls together might get a better breakdown if they've got actual sort of data, because we don't know what we required to enter as our information in order to get one of these photo ID cards in order to vote. Maybe they'd be looking for more detailed sort of information as to where, because exit polling has suffered in recent elections. So that's me putting 2 and 2 together and coming probably nowhere near the answer. But it's the only thing I can think of. So
I don't really understand it. It seems to be, in general, I'm kind of against most kind of things which involve photo IDs and trying to make things difficult for people. I just think it's part of a kind of society in which we move away from trust and we go towards a kind of tick box society where we kind of have to prove everything.
Exactly.
And Ben, you probably have come across a lot of this before, and I certainly see a lot of that working in education. So it's not necessarily something that I'm sure of.
Yeah, I mean, we've got passports, we've got driver's licenses. It's not too much of a stretch if you need visual proof to sort of prove generally who we are. As far as voting goes, you only need your polling card, and then you just have to recite your address to somebody sitting at a folding table. And the last couple of elections I've voted in, they haven't even asked. I've just handed the polling card, and they've said, "There you go. There's your ballot paper." Which at the time I found kind of worrying at the other side of things, but photo ID for elections.
I remember. Did they ask me when I voted? I can't even remember if they did. I just kind of brought my polling card and they crossed the name and you go do it. In fact, I think we should be going the other way. I mean, I'm all in favour, really, of trying to get as many people to vote as possible. Mm-hmm. And I think that we need to give some serious consideration to different ways in which we could run the voting process, whether that be, an option to vote by an app, if we can make it secure, some electronic means, anything really to make the process simpler. Because obviously we don't have the kind of issues that they have in the States with this, but there have been times, like even not only going back to a few elections ago, where people have actually been having to queue outside of polling stations.
Yeah, I think was it Sheffield in 2010. I think there were lines past but after 11 o'clock. I think people were kind of locked out. I think 13 hours. We were on air for 13 hours one general election. I think 15 hours is enough for you to be able to get your vote in. I think technically, but there we go. We'll have kind of busy lives. It is the week with me, Ben Ellis, here on Switch Radio, joined by a friend of the station, used to be with us all the time on Switch Show. We're delighted to have him back. It's Paul Atkins, and we're going through the stories. We talked about some national, we talked about some local. Let's go international. And there is still a petulant child in the White House who is refusing to accept reality, Paul. And Donald Trump, for those who aren't overly familiar with the story. It's like a really silly US kind of sitcom where the villain of the piece just kind of won't accept. And am I calling Donald Trump a villain? I don't know, but he just isn't accepting reality, is he?
Yeah, I think to some extent. I mean, it's quite difficult for journalists, isn't it? Because and as a kind of media and communications kind of academic myself, I've kind of been really fascinated by this. It's very difficult to maintain any kind of level of kind of distance from the story with Donald Trump, because he so clearly kind of goes over the line all the time. I mean, you just can't reasonably kind of you just really can't maintain any balance, really, can you?
No, you can't. And we spoke with on this show last week. You might have seen the video, Paul. We spoke with a journalist called Jessica Quinlan, American journalist trained in Birmingham. She was it's quite emotional, and we're not giving our opinions on who we think should win an election here, or who's right or who's wrong, or if it's left, if it's right, if it's centre, if it's diagonal. I don't care. This is about the freedom of the press to hold to account and take to task somebody who they believe is not telling the truth. And I think that's really, really, really important, that the leader of the free world is not going to be allowed to behave like, as some would say, the kind of despots of the world that some say he admires.
Yeah, and I think there's a whole story about how the American media has not been kind of very good at covering Trump. They just have never quite got a handle on him. And one of the things I found really fascinating is that if you really wanted to predict what Trump would do and get a handle on kind of what his motivations were and what was really going on, some of the best people for analysing this were people who worked in reality TV.
Yeah.
Who studied reality TV. And there's a guy called, I think his name is Michael Hirschkorn, and he's a reality TV producer. And he was on CNN the other day, and he was talking about how actually this is kind of like what happens when a reality TV show kind of runs out of steam. It's like the final kind of seasons of a kind of die-in reality TV show where they've kind of like run out of storylines. And it's kind of run out of steam, And at the moment, all they're doing is just trying to kind of build a program for a very narrow niche base. So unless you're kind of marinated in this program, you have no idea what's going on. And I think that for me was very much what it was like towards the end of Trump's campaign, where in 2016 he was very much kind of focused on issues that say what you like about him, but there were certainly issues that everyone could kind of could understand or worried about in some way, whether they be immigration or the economy or whatever. This time around, it just feels like it's just this bizarre conspiracy theory thing that if unless you're kind of marinated in it, you wouldn't really understand. Like that whole thing about Hunter Biden's laptop and all that kind of nonsense.
That's it.
It was all very niche, wasn't it? And very weird.
Yeah, I think the highlight of the week for me was Rudy Giuliani outside the garden centre. The Four Seasons. Yeah. So for those who don't know the story, Donald Trump tweeted out last Saturday morning that there's going to be a press conference held by his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. Yes, that Rudy Giuliani, that is going to happen at the Four Seasons, and they're going to unleash this evidence of widespread voter fraud. And for those who don't know, the Four Seasons is a chain of hotels, very posh hotels in Philadelphia. Donald Trump knows about hotels. We'll give him that. So he's just tweeted out that that's where it is. And then an hour later, he's deleted the tweet saying, no, it's Four Seasons. And what was the bit he tacked on at the end? I can't quite remember, but it was significantly different to just Four Seasons. And what the Four Seasons, where this press conference was held, was a garden centre next door to a crematorium and an adult bookstore.
He knows his base, right?
Yeah. Have we not just seen the Borat movie? This is just completely stitched Rudy Giuliani up. It's that just happened again. It not just happened for real. And
that was brilliant. To me, that seemed like the final coda for Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah.
At one point I never really thought much about him, but he was at one point this kind of major American hero, wasn't he?
He was called America's mayor. He was the public figure at as obviously mayor of New York in 2001, at ground zero, getting stuck in, being that public face of New Yorkers, of Americans. Didn't say much. Was quite a quiet, sort of somber kind of person, but obviously that kind of reflected the mood at the time. But I remember seeing him a few years later, and I'm my missus says I'm crazy for this, but I'm a big fan of the US late night talk shows, which you can see, and they've gone to town on Donald Trump the last 4 years in a highly entertaining way. And they started showing the things that kind of Rudy Giuliani has been up to in the last 4 years as Donald Trump's personal attorney. And it didn't click at first. It was like, that's the mayor from 9/11.
Yeah, it is.
What happened to him?
He must have had better advisors in the past. I don't know, but also Rudy Giuliani. I mean, there's lots of bad things to say about him, going back years. But he was one of them. When he was a prosecutor, he had a significant part in the bringing down of the mafia in New York, and by all accounts, quite a kind of at one point a brilliant legal mind. And then it's very difficult to square those two kind of Rudys between that guy and this guy who's literally outside an adult bookshop, kind of spouting conspiracy theories.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Kind of, so mad, really, when you think about it.
So what do we think will happen here? Donald Trump will probably never officially concede. There's been talk in the last sort of 24, 48 hours that he's losing the resolve to, I can't keep up this charade anymore of widespread voter fraud, and it keeps getting thrown out in the courts and stuff like that. So eventually he'll go, and Joe Biden will take over. But unless he stays out of trouble legally, Donald Trump, which that might be difficult for him. Given some of the, I've read reports that the district attorney in New York are waiting for him literally to leave the White House for stuff that he's going to have to deal with. But there's been talk he could run again in 2024, and given the amount of people that still voted for him this time, that could be the strategy for him.
It could be. I mean, I think what we're going to see in the next couple of weeks is that he's going to maybe concede a little bit, then he's going to go back. Even if he does kind of concede, a few days later, he's probably going to just going to revoke his concession anyway. So we're probably going to see a bit of a kind of pendulum, I would imagine. But also, it's just not in the interest of his brand to concede. It's quite obvious at this stage his plan is to leave the White House, kind of set up some kind of like cable news network, either in collaboration with ONN or Newsmax or something like that, and then continue to kind of just ride out this fantasy that the election was stolen.
Yeah,
and that works for him, and will work for him quite well, providing the law doesn't catch up with him. Which is, as you mentioned, is quite a bit of a problem, because even if he can pardon himself for federal crimes, which is up in the air, and many prominent legal scholars think he can't, he's still got the problem of state level crimes. So in particular, the Southern District of New York, that have a number of different investigations into Trump, which are going to be a little bit more difficult for him to run away from. On top of that, he's got all this kind of mountain debt, which is kind of due soon. So it's going to be an interesting couple of years, really, to see how it all evolves. But you're right. I don't think it's kind of going away. No. It's not. I think we should be under no illusions that just because we've got Biden now, that this whole Trumpism is going to sort of disappear. I think it's going to be with us for quite a long time.
Yeah, the outcome of the Senate race in January could be really important for Joe Biden, couldn't it? Because if he's got for those who are not aware of U.S. politics, it's not like the leader, the Prime Minister of Britain is the leader of the party and then can govern based on the parliamentary system. There's a complete difference between the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. They're usually sort of poles apart, aren't they? The Senate blocks the White House, and the House of Representatives tries to block the Senate, and it's messy, isn't it?
It is, and people forget that actually the Prime Minister of the UK has more power in terms of what goes on in the country than the President of the United States.
The President of the United States is the one who says we're going to war. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much kind of very much in control of kind of foreign policy, but when it comes to anything domestic, that's very much a purview of the Congress.
It is.
And I was watching because I watch a lot of American news network footage on YouTube and things like that. So MSNBC, Fox, CNN, all that kind of stuff. And I was watching an interview with Joe Manchin, who's one of the more kind of moderate, so-called moderate Democratic senators. And he was saying that actually he would block many of the things that Joe Biden wants to actually achieve. So ending the filibuster in the Senate, which would make it easier for Joe Biden to pass legislation. He said that he'll block that. He'll block Medicare for all. He'll block many parts of the kind of Democratic agenda. So Joe Biden's got a really tough time, because it's not as if the Democratic Party are all kind of walking in lockstep with this kind of progressive agenda.
Well, no, I mean, how many candidates did they have to run for the presidency at the start? There were about 50. And it was quite a bitter race just to get to whittle it down to Joe Biden. So I think we're going to have to leave it there. I think we've talked long enough. We've talked long enough. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you back with us on Switch Radio. And as a treat, if you want to hear more of Paul Atkins, if you check out our YouTube channel, we are going to upload all 13 hours of the 2015 general election. So
Ben, I don't think I can. I can't handle that. That night was so long. I have no idea what kind of nonsense I was talking at 4 a.m. in the morning.
Well, we were there. It was yourself, me, Dean Kavanagh, Callum Wilkes, Emma O'Brien at the time, down at the Counts. It was fantastic, and I've done. As I say, I'm coming up on 20 years doing this, and that's in the sort of top 5 of things that I've been fortunate enough to be involved with. And I've done football commentary, cup finals, and things like that, and lucky enough to have a breakfast show and stuff. But that night and that morning were right up there for me. So I'll always be appreciative of that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic, and it's very different to what I do now. Because now, of course, I work in education, and it's a very different experience. We did learn a lot that night, though. So you do stay up all night, but it's marking papers, not kind of doing kind of election commentary, unfortunately.
Yeah. What you can do, I say, if we upload our 13 hours of audio, if you get two YouTube videos open. One is our audio, and then put one of the big news channels there, visuals. Our coverage stacks up there, believe me. That's my guarantee. So,
is this like a really kind of geeky version of that thing where you listen to Dark Side of the Moon and play the Wizard of Oz? Is that?
Yeah. It really. Or I'm just a complete narcissist and I like listening to my own voice for 13 hours. But there we go. Paul, thank you very much indeed. Thanks very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
For more great videos from the week, make sure you subscribe to our channel. It's down here somewhere. And don't forget, you can catch us on the radio every Sunday between 12 and 2 on FM across Birmingham, 107.5, on mobile, on DAB and online. We're made for Birmingham. This is Switch Radio.